Okay, good, good. So, so it's reassuring that we have each other to keep company. Like if somebody is diagnosed with some ailment, and then the doctor says you're the only one, never seen a patient like you before. That's bad news for the patient. That means they don't have a diagnosis for the disease. They don't have a cure. Yeah, you can lower your hands. Thank you. But the fact that there are the fact that it's a condition that is um, prevalent, um, it's it gives hope that there is a diagnosis and cure for it. So in Madhurya Kadambini, uh, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he calls this as Anishtha Bhakti. Anishtha Bhakti is one that is Ghan and Taral. Right, so Ghan means that sometimes it's concentrated, that you get up in the morning, chant your rounds, do the deity worship, want to read the scriptures, then go to the temple, associate with the devotees, come back, honor prasadam. So by the time your day is gone, it's non-stop service one way or the other, either 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 by your hands or by ears or by your tongue, and you go to bed satisfied. Good day. Today. And then there are some days when you get up in the morning, it's difficult to pick up your bead bag. Even if you pick it up, the chanting is in and out. So that's Ghantara. It's uh, um, it's concentrated and it's diluted. And sometimes it's also uh, just 1 minute. Indulika, you may want to mute yourself. So sometimes it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He gives a slightly humorous spin to it, where he says that not only during the course of a day, even during one's lifetime, one goes through this Ghantara. Right? He says that uh, when the devotee is a brahmachari, he says, I just live in the temple. I'll serve the deities, I'll serve the devotees, I will strictly follow celibacy, I will serve my Guru Maharaj, and then I will take sannyas. Right? So, so then he is completely focused. And then later on, he after a few years, he said maybe I should marry, and I will serve the Lord by serving the family. So then he marries, he builds a house, and he gets absorbed over there, and then his devotional service slackens. And then after some time, he says, "Okay, now it's enough. Now it's time for me to focus again." And then again, his bhakti, it becomes ghan. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad gives three causes for unsteady sadhana, and of course, the reason he gives the three causes is uh, because there are cures for each of the causes, and we can also relate to it. So the first cause that he gives, so the general cause he gives for Anishta Bhakti is anarthas. Anarthas are offenses. Artha is something that is useful, anartha is something that is useless. So basically, past anarthas, they cause Anishta Bhakti. And he says these anarthas are in three categories. They're offenses coming from past sinful activities. There are offenses coming from past pious activities. and then there are offenses that is coming from bhakti. He gives this three, and then so let's see what's the nature of them. So we'll take an example to understand each of these three categories. So offenses from past sinful activities are perhaps easiest to understand. That one who has done sinful activities, they have developed that inclination uh, uh, for violating the scriptures. They have that inclination, and because of that, uh, their 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 proclivity, their propensity to follow rules and regulations is weak. They are more inclined to follow their impulses. Mind says do this, you do this. Ego says you follow this, it follows this, and that's why the bhakti becomes mitigated. Example of this is Dhritarashtra. That Dhritarashtra was not able to take to bhakti because of his sinful disposition, and we see that in his strong ego, that he wanted to hold on to the kingdom, how he was condoning Duryodhana, right? And finally, towards the end of his life, Vidur was very mercifully able to almost, he had like surgery, shock treatment, that he had to give up these material, sinful material desires, because even though he was old, even though he had been defeated in the battle, he was living in the house of the Pandavas who had actually killed his sons, but he was just so attached to his position of being in the royal or in the proximity of royalty, that he was just simply staying there. So we see the similar case in the sons of Kuber. The Nal, Kuber and Managriv, because of being born in wealth and in opulence, it was difficult for them to take to the process of devotion. Now, in both cases, because of the mercy of a devotee, they were able to take it. So what's the lesson here for us? That it may slow things down, but it's not unsurmountable. Dhritarashtra by the mercy of Vidur, and Nalkuber and Managri by the mercy of Narad Muni, they were able to execute devotional service in some form. Right? So Dhritarashtra, he followed the process of Astanga Yoga, and Nalkuber and Managri, they got the personal darshan of Krishna during Damodar Leela and went back as devotees. Now, the second lesson for us is to avoid sinful activities, because we know that they are impediments to devotion. So when one does these activities, there is of course a karmic cycle that's going on, that you do sinful activities and you have to suffer the consequences of it. That's the cycle of karma that is working. But we also know that it will become an impediment to one's devotional service. Now, strictly speaking, bhakti is independent of any material consideration. But we are not independent, right? So there is the practice and there is the practitioner. So bhakti is independent of the modes of material nature, any kind of material consideration. But the practitioner is not. So because of being weighed down by sins, we will not be able to practice bhakti. Like the only way we can get the mercy of Krishna is by engaging in bhakti. Then the mercy is unmitigated. But that mercy is commensurate to how much we engage in bhakti. And sinful activities, they become an obstacle to it. So that's why we follow the four regulative principles, that they stop us from performing grossly sinful activities. And the general mood of a devotee is to, one way or other, stay clear of sinful activities. And so whether it is stealing or lying or telling or hurting somebody or causing harm, so there is a whole slew, and by their general propensity, devotees steer clear of them, because they will undoubtedly slow down one's bhakti. It will cause this anishtha. It will cause this weakness in sadhana. Let's look at the second one, which is offenses from past pious activities. This is slightly more difficult to understand, because if you're not performing sinful activities, then the recommendation is that you perform pious activities. So how can offenses from past pious activities be detrimental to bhakti? So the understanding of this cause is that when one performs pious activities explicitly for the purpose of material enjoyment, that becomes offensive. So how does this expand? That when people take shelter of demigods, when people take shelter of karma kanda, then it becomes an obstacle to bhakti, because then one is no longer able to take exclusive shelter of Krishna. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, at several points, he makes this point that take exclusive shelter of me. Those who follow karma kand, they are men of little intelligence, and alpamedesha, worshippers of demigods. Not because he wants to demean them or belittle them, but because it goes against the nature of bhakti. Bhakti is that one takes shelter of Krishna and Krishna only. Now one can still respect, one can still pray to the demigods in relationship with Krishna, that they are exalted devotees of Krishna. In the Bhagavatam, there is the example of Maharaj Nrigi. Right? Maharaj Nrigi, he was performing charity extensively, and the whole purpose of his whole mission was that I will perform pious activities and I will go to heaven. And then there was a small truti, that he gave cows in charity to a Brahman. One of the cows left the herd, came back, so that cow was given to another Brahman, and then both the Brahmins started quarreling, and Maharaj Negi, he offered to compensate them with 1,000 cows, but the Brahmins were not pacified. So then when Maharaj Negi died, then Yamraj said that you have performed so much pious activities that you can enjoy in the heavenly kingdom for a very, very long time. But there is this one offense that you did, and there is some suffering that is related to that. So it's up to you. You can enjoy and suffer, or suffer and enjoy. So Negi said, let me get the suffering out of the way, I will then enjoy. He said, let me bear the consequences of this. So he became a lizard. And he became a lizard in Dwarka. And that also in one of Krishna's palace. And in the Bhagavatam it's shown that one day Krishna's sons were playing, so the ball falls in that well, and then they see in that an effulgent lizard. So they go to Krishna, they say there is this wonderful creature, it's a lizard, but it seems to be an extraordinary lizard. So then Krishna extends his hand down the well, takes out the lizard, and then by the touch of Krishna's hand, Mrigi, he is restored. Now here comes the interesting point, that Mrigi is in front of Krishna. And what does Mrigi ask? That please allow me to go back to my heavenly abode to enjoy heavenly pleasures. That was his conditioning. In front of him is Krishna. He could have asked Krishna, give me bhakti. He could have asked Krishna that allow me to stay in your garden so that I can witness your pastimes, so make me a devotee. So many things he could have asked. Krishna is standing right in front of him. But what he's asking is, allow me to go back to my heavenly abode, because I know he's still remembering that Yamraj told him that you have a lot of enjoyment in store for you. So that's the nature of the contamination by piety. So in a more contemporary example, when people distribute their nishtha, that they will worship Krishna on Fridays, and they will worship Durga Devi on Saturdays, and Lord Ganesh on Wednesdays. So as a result of that, they have that strong relationship, that exclusivity that Krishna demands does not manifest. And at the end of the day, bhakti is really a blessing from Krishna. And bhakti is Srimati Radharani, right? And Srimati Radharani is the internal potency of Krishna. So bhakti is bestowed upon us. Srimati Radharani gives her mercy to us. And when she sees that this person is too much into enjoyment or taking shelter at other places, she withdraws. She withholds her mercy. So in our lives, the understanding is, it's not that when we look at, we say that past pious activities can result in slowing down our sadhana. So we say that, okay, from today onwards, I will not perform any pious activities because I am going to be focused on my bhakti. It does not mean that. What it means is that the pious activities that will be performed will be in relation to Krishna. If you're giving in charity, then you give it with this understanding that Krishna has given me some wealth and I am using that to help somebody else, and so on. There. The third category is offenses from bhakti. And this is perhaps a little easier to understand, that in the execution of bhakti, inadvertently, there are offenses that are performed. Sometimes they are in the execution of bhakti, sometimes they are in the conception of bhakti. Right? So there are three examples in the Bhagavatam. There is the example, well, two examples in Bhagavatam, and one is from Chaitanya Leela. One example is of Prahlad Maharaj. That Prahlad Maharaj in his previous life, he cleans the temple of Lord Nrsimhadev. He is not a devotee in that life. He cleans the temple of Lord Nrsimhadev without knowing that it's a temple of Lord Nrsimhadev. He's cleaning it because he had a tryst with his girlfriend. But when she comes, they have a disagreement, and they basically stay awake quarreling all night, and it happened to be Narsingh Chaturdashi. Right? So he performed bhakti, but there were offenses linked to it. And that's why he was born as a devotee, but in a demoniac family. And his father was, big demon. We see the case of Narad Muni, that after he had received the mercy of the Bhakti Vedantas, he travels through the forest practicing devotional service. But in doing so, he gets very much attached to the mode of goodness. Right? So his bhakti becomes predicated on mode. So predicated on mode of goodness, meaning that somebody says, uh, I can only chant if there is complete serenity around me and everybody is quiet, otherwise I can't chant. Or I can only chant if my mind is cooperating completely, or I can only do deity worship if there is complete cleanliness. So while these things are recommended, one should not make them a precondition, right? Because then your bhakti becomes anchored on something that is material. Good to chant in a serene environment, but does not mean that you give up chanting if the environment is not serene. Like sometimes people say, oh, I chant on days when I feel inspired. So essentially, what they're saying is that when there is a prominence of the mode of goodness, then I execute bhakti. If there is not, then I give up bhakti. Right? So we can see how this becomes anishta. Third example is that of Haridas Thakur. This is not from Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is I'm actually not sure where it comes, but I heard about this in one of the lectures, that Haridas Thakur in his previous life was born in a devotee family, and his father was very pakka sadhaka, and and Haridas would help his father, or whatever he was in his previous life, he would help his father in collecting the paraphernalia for the deities. And so one day he was collecting flowers, and some of the flowers fell on the ground. So he just picked it up and put it back on the arati plate. And then his father got very angry at him and cursed him that you're acting like a Malecha, so you become a Malecha. And that's why he took birth in a Mohammedan family. But he was still a devotee, so he continued. In our personal practices, we have examples in our lives that if you tend to perform the angas of bhakti to the best of our ability, then they support each other. And if we don't, then they weaken each other. So if you do good chanting, your deity worship will be good. If you do good deity worship, then your reading will be good. If you are doing good chanting, good deity worship, good reading, then Vaishnava Sangha will blossom. Right? So it's how the various angas of bhakti are nourishing each other, and then conversely, how offenses in that could affect the other angas. Right? If you are doing deity worship inattentively or with a lot of offenses, then it will affect your chanting. Or if you are doing inattentive chanting, it will affect your deity worship. A lot of it comes, the litmus test of these offenses come in Vaishnava Sangha. So if one wants to see that am I committing offenses related to bhakti, then one should ask oneself these simple questions: that do I look forward to associating with devotees? Am I associating in a mood of service or in an offensive mood? Do I look forward to chanting? If the answers to that is yes, 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 then one can be reassured. And if the answers are no, 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 then one needs to start worrying, especially Vaishnava Sangha, because devotees carry everything with them. They carry chanting, deity worship, study of scripture, everything they carry within themselves. So if one is beginning to become averse to Vaishnava Sangha, then one can automatically understand that there are offenses that are being committed, and then if one is committing offenses to Vaishnavas, then that will manifest in everywhere else. It will manifest in chanting. It will manifest in the other rangas of bhakti. So let me pause over here and see if there is any comments or discussion on what we have spoken so far. Go ahead and do it.
So, conclusion is that ultimately it's the choice of the soul. It's my choice whether I want to take that mercy and apply it in my life, and better my chanting, better my deity worship, and recognize Krishna as supreme, or just accept theoretically and then do my own thing.
I would I would mostly agree. Sometimes it's not so much, at least amongst sincere devotees, the offenses are not by by choice, but because of lack of choice. So one very few devotees will kind of start the day saying that, like, let me do offenses in my deity worship, let me do offenses to other Vaishnavas.
No, I didn't mean it. I wasn't referring to the offenses. I was in general referring to the practices of chanting and deity worship, and like you were saying, right? That this this lizard. What was that Rishi's name?
Nrigi, Maharaj Nrigi.
Nrigi, right? Yeah, Maharaj Nrigi. Yeah. So he's getting darshan of Krishna. Krishna is right in front of him, and yet he's asking for going to the heavenly planets to enjoy. So the choice was his, right? Whether it was the false ego or the free will or whatever he misused, but ultimately it was the choice he made. So that's how I'm trying to see on myself, that ultimately it is my choice. I understand Krishna is the supreme personality of God. I understand that my goal should be to go back to Krishna. This is the path Prabhupada has shown us. This is what I'm supposed to do, and yet I choose not to. Right? I make the wrong choices many times.
Yeah. At the root of it, yes, it's the choice of the jiva. The jiva makes that choice that 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 let me do this. Probably the only modification I'm making is that many times the jiva actually makes the right choice, but because of different reasons is not able to execute on it. So the focus of this discussion is for that category. See, if the jiva has already made the choice that I don't want to go, like Maharaj Negi or Dhritarashtra or whatever, it's a choice, right? They've embarked on their path. There is also those jiva that want to go back to Krishna. The choice is there, but yet there are deviations there, right? How can we now? To some extent, you're right that those deviations are also because of
our choices,
the
right?
choice of
our
the
decisions.
jiva, but because of the decision. I think that's a good distinction. That while the choice is there, that I choose to go back to Krishna, there may be decisions that are made that slow down that execution of that choice. So when something cannot be fixed from within, it gets fixed from outside. Right? So that's because otherwise there will be no hope, right? That's the whole
So when you're referring to when you're using this word, it gets fixed from outside. Are you saying Krishna is going to fix it? Krishna is going to give it like
Krishna could fix it, and that's the later part of the discussion, that how it gets fixed. But yes, you know,
or the spiritual master.
spiritual master, other Vaishnavas. So yes, that's the okay. Thank you. Sachijeevan Prabhu.
So, the point you are making here, I mean, the main point here is that if someone is just doing pious activities in the mode of Sattvagun and those kind of things, I mean, not necessarily they would choose that path of Krishna consciousness or going back to Krishna, because the pious activity in that particular mode, they would like to enjoy that result. I was just thinking that in this particular case, I mean, the king, Mriti, right? So he didn't do that offense intentionally. It just happened where he didn't have any control. That the cow come back, and then without knowing, he donated it to someone else. Everything has happened unintentionally, and still he has to suffer that. So that means that is that also a factor that when someone doing a pious activity, there's still chances that he or she will make offenses, even unknowingly, and then has to suffer that consequence. Whereas if someone is in a bhakti marg or following the bhakti yoga, then even little mistakes here and there, Krishna kind of forgive that. Or the devotees, they forgive it. So in this particular case, whoever the rishi or whoever got that the donation, he was unsatisfied. Versus if someone is in Krishna consciousness, devotees by nature are forgiveness, right? So probably that chance of doing a mistake is less. Even if there is a mistake, there will be someone to forgive it, or at least Krishna will be there. Is that a true understanding?
I would agree, Prabhu. I mean, that's the reason this pastime is in Bhagavatam, to make the two excellent points you made. One is to show that this path of Karamkand is very treacherous, is very easy to slip. And this case, it's really, he, even though he suffered for it, but as you were saying, there's no control of it. The cows basically, on their own, the cow came back, and he offered to compensate them several times over, but yet he had to suffer. That's the nature of karma kand. That you make one mistake, and you have to suffer enormous consequences. So if you do everything to perfection, you basically get a heavenly body which goes away after some time. You make a mistake, you go the other route. And then bhakti, on the other hand, because you are working in a relationship, lot of latitude. Like Krishna says, Api Chesudarachara Bhajate Mahananyama, right? He declares it himself, that even if the person does most abominable activity, right? If he is properly situated, then sadhureva mantavya. Then you should consider him to be a devotee. That's the difference between a father and a son, and somebody who's working in a work environment. The son does something wrong, the father will chastise him, but he continues to remain the son. The father will continue to love him and protect him. But if you're in a work environment, you do something wrong, your boss will say, okay, fine, you're fired, go away. No matter how much good work you have done in the past. So these pastimes are there to basically give us that. And Vishwanath Chakravarti brings this point forth to kind of emphasize the two aspects of pious activities. That doing pious activities is a slippery slope, and he considers, so all the Maharaj Mrigi part he considers it to be inconsequential. Fine, he became a lizard. What's the difference between the body of a lizard and the body of a human being? Ultimately they are both material bodies. But the biggest downside that he considers from pious activities is that it impedes bhakti. So again, he does not say give up pious activities, but give up pious activities in the mood for material enjoyment. So thank you, Prabhu, for making those points.
Hari Bol Prabhu. The one other thing I had long time ago heard was similar thing about Dhruva Maharaj, that he, after he got the boon that he wanted to be on a highest position, regretted that he asked that instead of asking for bhakti, because he became the polar star and instead he could have been in the service.
He did in the fourth canto, that conversation that after the Lord appears and he says to Dhruva Maharaj, ask what you want, and Dhruva Maharaj right away says at that time that all I want is service to you. So then Lord Vishnu says, yeah, I'll give you service, but you wanted the kingdom, right? So I'll give you this also. You wanted to rule, so I'll give you 36,000 years of ruling, etc., etc. And then he goes away. And then Dhruva Maharaj says that the Lord will only give benediction based on the desires of the asker. So he must have detected that I still have material desires in me, which is why he gave me all this benedictions. And then who does he blame? Who does Dhruva Maharaj blame? He blames the demigods. He says that they are all too much into material enjoyment and they must have definitely influenced me. Now he's a 5-year-old child, so he said they must have influenced me into asking for, or he didn't ask, but he said wanting these, because he's not blaming the Lord for giving him material benedictions. He's blaming himself that I had this desire somewhere in my heart, so the Lord responded. But then the potency of bhakti is that Dhruva Maharaj got both. Right? He ruled for 36,000 years, then he got a position that was higher than Brahma in Dhruvaloka, and then he has personal association of Lord Vishnu. Right? So he's worshipping Lord Vishnu over there. So that's the potency of bhakti, that on its own it will fulfill all material desires as well as spiritual desires.
Thank you. That clears the whole.
Nice observation. Okay, so moving forward, if we have understood I realize that we forgot to chant, so I'll try and speak for maybe another 10 minutes, and then after that any discussion, and then we'll chant around. So in the 6th chapter of so now we are basically in the solution mode, right? Because none of the acharyas, they put this to not with the desire to beat us down, say that you have anishta bhakti, the reason because is you're suffering from these offenses. But it's like a doctor. The doctor sees the symptoms, he says you're suffering from this. Now the doctor is not going to leave you there saying you're suffering from this, get out of my office. What the doctor immediately does now is saying that this is how I can help you, this is the cure. That's the mood of the acharyas. So in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna talks about Astanga Yoga, then Arjuna, he objects to it. And he says, Chanchalami Mana Krishna. Right? He says the mind he says that it is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. Right? He talks about three qualities that are impediments. That it's restless, turbulent, and obstinate. And supporting it is that it is very strong. So if it was weak, then you could overpower it, but it's like you have an opponent and he has all bad qualities, but the reason that opponent is formidable is because he's very strong. Otherwise you could just beat him out and take him, but he's a strong opponent, right? So that's why Arjuna says that restless, turbulent, and obstinate. So what does Krishna say? Asamshayam mahabhavo. That you are saying is asamshayam. It's completely correct. But I have the solution for it. He says, abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagena chagrahate. Right? So he gives two things, that by suitable practice and by detachment. So these two things are in a way the pillars of sadhana bhakti. That when we say that it's sadhana Vaidhi bhakti, so Vaidhi means we perform it according to rules and regulations, and sadhana means we practice it. So Krishna is saying that the mind has all these things that can distract you. But these are the two things that you can do to curb. He says to curb the restless mind. Right? He says Mano Durnigram Chanchal. So as practicing devotees, what is the lesson for us? That our bhakti someday may be ghan, someday taral. But we continue to practice it. Someday our rounds may be good, some days not so good. Some days our deity worship may be strong, some days may be weak. But we persevere. Once Prabhupada was standing in Vrindavan, I believe, and then he noticed that there was a woman who was going there and getting water from the Yamuna river for the deities, and she would do it every day. And Prabhupada said, just for that service, she will go back to Gondit. The disciples were a little surprised that what's the service she's doing? She's just going and taking a balti, putting it in the Yamuna and getting there. But she was doing it every day. And that was the Dhrid Vrata. She was an old woman, and regardless of whether the service was big or small, but she was committed to doing it every day. So when we demonstrate the same commitment, and when we make a commitment that we will chant whatever round, 1 round, 16 round, 5 round, but we demonstrate that commitment that we will chant that round every day. Sometimes devotees say, someday I'll chant 16 rounds, someday I'll chant 5 rounds, someday I'll chant 2 rounds. And when somebody tells me that, I know for sure, 100%, that in the near future this person is going to be chanting 0 rounds. So much better to chant just 1 round every day than to say that one day I chant 64 rounds, one day I chant no rounds. Right? Because then the abhyasena tu kaunteya, right? That dedication to the service is not demonstrated. Vairagena, the second thing that Krishna says is vairagya. So vairagya means that without excessive attachment. Now, as followers of sadhana bhakti, Vairagya does not mean that we go to the jungle and start performing Nijan bhajan. Vairagya means that, like, Rupa Goswami, he talks about the opposite of Vairagya in the Nectar of Instruction. Right, in the second verse, he talks about Atyahara Prayaschascha Prajalpaniyam Agra Jansangascha Lolyam Cha Shadbir Bhaktir Vinashriti. So that's the opposite of Vairagya. So Atyahara is collection. Ahar means food. One meaning is one who eats too much food. Also means that one who is collecting too much money, too much things. Then press, just over endeavor. That I have to whatever achieve this. Then prajalpa is basically just meaningless talk, mundane subjects. Then niyamagraha means that just whimsically ignoring rules and regulations. Right? Somebody has said that in order to do this, these are the rules and regulations. Like acharyas say, to chant on beats. In a way, it's a niyam. Now you can chant without beats, but the recommendation is to chant on beats. And somebody says, no, it's chanting. At the end of the day, it's chanting. Whether I chant on my hands or chant in my mind, you can make and have an argument about that. But at the end of the day, you are violating a niyam. The niyam is that you chant on beats. Right? And at least your minimum rounds, your prescribed rounds, you chant on beats, then you can chant. In the temple, I remember it was a funny conversation, but also it was revealing that there was a devotee was talking to somebody, he was just preaching to him, and he says, Prabhu, you should chant at least one round a day. And then he says, oh, I'm chanting all day. I'm like complete chanting from morning to evening. And then the devotee said, that's very good. So you can chant one round, right? If you're chanting from morning to evening, then you can always take out 5 minutes to chant one round. Oh, no, I can't take out. But I'm chanting morning to evening. So it's just being whimsical. That this is my niyam, I follow it. It indicates a lack of summation. It's like you're driving on the road. So, well, the speed limit is 55, the road is empty, I can drive at 80. If the cop will catch you, he'll still give you a ticket. Right? He won't say that, okay, I understand what you're saying, the road was empty, so you could drive at 80. He's still going to give you a ticket because the rule is a rule. Then Prajalpa. Prajalpa is a little difficult to always follow because we have a work condition, we have to do work. Even amongst devotees, we have talks that are about mundane subject matters, but exclusively following Prajalpa, which means, so Prajalpa is opposed to Krishna Katha. So there should always be time for Krishna Katha. Otherwise, it weakens the relationship between devotees. And like the nurturing of the relationship amongst devotees is when things are centered around Krishna. When one is sitting and eating Krishna Prasad together, doing Krishna Katha, talking about confidential matters relating to Krishna, that's what nurtures the Vaishnava Sangha. And the last two are more easy to understand, that Jan Sangas. That the more we associate with worldly minded people, the more we will begin to be inspired by them. Like somebody says, do you know today I made a killing in the stock market? Oh, okay. And maybe after the fifth time, you'll ask him, what stocks did you buy? or somebody says, oh my God, this particular thing is the greatest thing, this fashion or whatever, and eventually you say, okay, what is it? So the association of with worldly minded people will rub. Association is very, very powerful. And lolium is just being greedy for mundane achievements. So, in contrast to this, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Madhya Leela, he gives us 5 things that are very, very potent. And before we go to the 5 things, wanted to share briefly with you a Prabhupada story. So, Prabhupada had a disciple called Haridas Prabhu. And when Haridas Prabhu was young, he was he was from Bombay, and he was one of those street kids. He lived on the streets. He indulged in petty crime, and he was kind of a small thief. So he was caught once stealing. He was put in jail. So, excuse me. So while he was in jail, he happened to read a Back to Godhead magazine. And in the Back to Godhead, there was a picture of Srila Prabhupada. So he became very much taken in by the picture of Prabhupada. But for the wrong reason. Well, he was taken in by the watch on Prabhupada's hand. Because Prabhupada was, his disciples would give him gifts, and Prabhupada would accept the gift and wear it for some time and then give it as maha to somebody else. So one of his disciples had presented him a gold watch, and Prabhupada liked that watch. He was wearing it for some time, then later on he gave it. So this picture was taken while Prabhupada had that gold watch on his wrist. So this person became very interested with that watch. So he became like, I want to steal that watch from this old man. So when he was released from jail, he took this back to Godhead and he started inquiring, where can I find this person? So it led him to the Juhu temple. So when he went to the Juhu temple, he showed the picture and he says, where is this person? I said, well, right now he's traveling, he's not over here, he'll come there. So he was like, I don't want to miss the opportunity to steal the watch, so better for me to stay here. So he started living in the temple. And the other devotees said that if you have to live in the temple, you have to chant, shave up. He said, okay. So he shaved up and all that. Then one day, he found out from the other devotees that Prabhupada had come, but he was in Hyderabad. So he told his other people there, I have to meet Swamiji. So he went to Hyderabad. He went to Hyderabad. He somehow got to speak to Prabhupada. So when he came in the presence of Prabhupada, now Prabhupada was not wearing the watch anymore. He had given it to somebody. But when he came in the presence of Prabhupada, he simply confessed everything. He said, this is why I joined, this is my motivation was to steal your watch. So whatever watch Prabhupada was wearing at that time, he gave it to him. He said, you want a watch? Take this watch. So this person said, no, I don't want your watch. So Prabhupada laughed and said that you're smart, because now I will give you even more opulence. And Prabhupada initiated him. His name became Haridas Das, and he went on to become an extremely rich person. He's somehow got interested in, so ITV, right? ISKCON TV. He's the owner of that, and he produces movies. He has 3 or 5 expensive houses in Juhu. Um, very fixed up devotee. I don't know about now. This I heard about 10 years ago, but uh, very completely in the mood of service to devotees. Very rich, but always trying to serve. Like he produced movies in Bollywood, but then he started ITV to produce videos and movies for ISKCON. He has like these houses and he lets devotees stay there. Mostly they're meant for devotees. So uh, that eagerness that he had, even though it was misplaced, it ultimately led him to bhakti. Dhruv Maharaj had that eagerness. Right? In his case, that eagerness was fueled with anger. But he had that eagerness. So, if we are able to imbibe that utsaha, if you are able to imbibe that eagerness, then these ups and downs of the the various practices, they will automatically get smoothed over. Right? So if there is a pipe and in the pipe there are ups and downs, if the water is going slowly, then it will ripple up and down. If the water is going with the force, it will simply skim up the uh, above it. It will simply go as a stream. So if we are powering our bhakti with utsaha, with eagerness, then just the force of eagerness will will take us through. So I wanted to end with Mahaprabhu's recommendation. So Mahaprabhu in the Madhya Leela, he gives the 5 most potent aspects by which one can steady one's bhakti. So by the association of devotees, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, by regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, by worshipping the deity, and by residing in a holy place. He says residing in Mathura, and Prabhupada says that if one cannot reside in Mathura, one cannot reside in Vrindavan, then one can make one's house Vrindavan by the worship, by association, by creating that mood over there. So, because of the mercy of Prabhupada, all this is available to us. He has created this Sangha, this opportunity for us to associate with devotees. He has given us the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to chant. He has translated the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam, so many other books that we can read and hear. He has given us deities at the temple and deities at home, and given us simplified ways to worship the deities and make our house Vrindavan. How do we make our house Vrindavan? If there is Krishna there, if there is Radharani there, if there is Tulsi Devi there, right? If there is the chanting of the holy name going on, the house is not different from Vrindavan. Okay, so let me stop over here and see if there is any discussion. Dhaval?
Yes, sir. Hari Bol, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Prabhuji, you mentioned about those 5 attributes, for increasing our potency for steadiness. So I did not hear about the reading aspect of the books, and what I heard about is more of association, chanting, yes, hearing, and other 2 attributes, but nothing about reading books and everything. How does that affect your potency for steadiness? And the reason I kind of mention is because I'm not sure about it, but yeah, I mean that my journey, and as you mentioned about it, in terms of consistency, one of the things doing the practice every day kind of builds on the habit of steadiness. And for me, that was kind of a driving force. Reading Srimad Bhagavatam every day helped me somewhat to cultivate my, that steadiness towards my bhakti. But when I kept going with that, so just kind of curiosity, while book reading was not one of the attributes.
So reading is at the same level as here. So the five angas are Vaishnav Sangha, which is associating with devotees. Then Harinam Sankirtan, which is Japa or Sankirtan. Then Bhagavad Seva. Bhagavad Seva is basically Bhagavad Seva is either reading the Bhagavad or hearing it or reciting it. Then Arch Vigraha Seva, which is worshipping of devotees, and Mathura Vas, which is basically living in Mathura or associating, making your place Mathura. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself followed these five angas, and Bhagavatam was a big part of it. He would actually spend hours reciting Bhagavatam, hearing it. We see that in his followers also. That the six Goswamis, they would spend hours and hours a day, either doing just Bhagavad Katha or reciting verses from Bhagavatam, appreciating pastimes from Bhagavatam. Is definitely one of the strong supporting angas for steady bhakti.
Thank you. And one other question, Prabhuji, about chanting. I mean, I know the biggest enemy and our biggest friend is the mindset. I mean, if we cannot, if we can chant at least one round with that potency that we know that we are hearing back sometimes, sometimes if we chant but our mind is not there, how potent is it really to keep chanting? But if you don't have your mindset, does it really, has anything? I mean, or just one chant, but you're still able to at least be more attentive towards your chanting.
So the more one chants, the more the likelihood of one getting that one attentive mantra. Sometimes people say that rather than chanting 16 inattentive rounds, I'll chant one attentive round. But the ability to chant that one attentive round comes from chanting 16 rounds. When you chant the 16 round, then if you're fortunate, then one round is also being too optimistic. Maybe one mantra will become will be there. But that's what you have to do. Right? You have to. It's like an athlete saying that the person is a sprinter and he says, I'll just go and run that one race and win. But to win, that person has to so many times they practice and then they become qualified to win that. So does not mean that we chant 16 rounds inattentively thinking that maybe I'll hit one or two here and there. When one is trying to do attentive chanting for this 16 rounds, one is fortunate, one will get some mantras in there that are there. Because like you rightly said, that the mind is a mind of its own. We may make this have the desire or decision, and then very soon the mind is leading us away. But abhyasena, like that's what Krishna says, practice, practice, practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, go ahead, Indulekha.
Just in reply to what Dhaval was saying, I don't know if Dhaval you've been reading the Namat family postings. Saran Prabhu always puts them in the mornings before chanting. He'll put a posting about chanting. Usually it is related to chanting only. And Gurujan Prabhu, I think a few postings back only, Gurujan Prabhu was talking about mind, controlling the mind, and that was because that is the biggest fight, struggle, whatever you call it. And in that he's saying the same thing. Don't think about what you've done, what you're going to be doing in the future. Just focus on what you are doing now, on the mantra that you're going to be chanting now, and that helps a lot in our chanting. So you chant one mantra nicely, and then you go to the next, and then you chant that nicely, and then you go to the next, and so on. So it's powerful. I mean, I've been trying to practice that myself.
Thank you.
Prabhuji.
Yes, Hari Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for the wonderful class. There are so many lessons that I should be focusing on, but thank you very much. I would try to follow them. Prabhuji, one kind of generic question, like you mentioned about Haridas Thakur in his previous life. So we know that he is none other than Brahma himself. So after Brahma attending Krishna, so from that pastime and becoming Haridas Thakur, he has other lives too, or sometimes I hear that Haridas Thakur is a combined incarnation of two personalities or three personalities, like that I heard once. So this pastime relates to that other devotee.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the personalities who come.
Couldn't hear you, Prabhuji.
Oh, sorry, Prabhu. I had myself on mute. I think it's a good question. I think the personalities who come in Chaitanya Leela, a little complicated. Sometimes they have one personality, two personalities. Sometimes there's a jiva that's being empowered. So not sure if Haridas Thakur in his previous life was also Brahma, or he was a jiva and he continued to be the jiva. Also, like I said, this particular I myself don't know where it is from. I heard it in a lecture, but I myself don't know. It's not in Chaitanya Charitamrita. As far as we know, we've read Chaitanya Mangal, Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's not there, so not sure where. I was a little reluctant to use it over here, but from where I heard it, the source was authoritative. He didn't give his source, but that's why I was using it.
Yes, Prabhuji. I think it. My question is also not that important kind of, but I was just curious.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Okay.
And regarding chanting also, like many times my experience is, first round will be generally bad, and sometimes it may go to 2 rounds also. After that, when you get the hold of it, I get the feel that, why did I chant my first 2 rounds like that? But without those 2, I can't come to the third.
That is true. That's why it said that you have to chant to 16 rounds to get that one mantra.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you for sharing, Prabhu. Okay, so we will, if you can unmute yourself, we will chant one round.